Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No.
No. Not us. But we don't have.
We don't have roll call, but we should probably take attendance for county board purposes. Go ahead, Kath.
Dale Olson,
Here.
Ben Kurzweil,
Here.
Robert Langham, Mike Bando, Steve Beining, Jim Strandlin,
Present.
Laura Rusk, Sarah Delaney, Ron Kinsley, James Bassett, Tom Housel, Bon Sutton, Pete Baraboo.
Here.
Thank you.
Let the record show we do have a quorum. And we'll go on to the agenda. Any discussion on that?
Just a quick question. There was questions from J2 before about number 17. We had that on our digital copy, but I'm not really sure what that's about, the action on MDD document. Or is that just the heading and then A is what we wanted to have?
Well, I think we kind of doubled up there with number 15.
Okay.
Just trying to make sure the process, when we're done, which is hopefully very soon, where does it go? Is there anything we could approve today? But I don't think there will be. But I think that was kind of the discussion on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no objection, we will move on with the agenda. Did you get a chance to look at the draft minutes of the last meeting?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion made by Kinsley,
I'll second that.
seconded by Mr. Kurzweil.
Discussion made. Can I recommend that we change the heading on the minutes before approval? It says public hearing. At least on my copy.
We surely can.
Thank you.
With that addition, is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve.
It's already been made.
Or has it already been made?
Yeah, we already did that.
Okay.
You wanna vote on it?
Yep.
All right, then we're to public comment. I have one here from Linda Zilmer.
You got a motion and a second.
We gotta vote on it.
Oh, we haven't vote on it yet. We do have a motion and a second. All in favor of the certification of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There. And then on to public comment.
Linda Zilmer, resident of the village of Birchwood and property owner in Edgewater for a long time. Want to speak to the process about how this committee was formed and how it could possibly move better and move along faster. I compare this to the Tourist Rooming House Ad Hoc Committee that was formed. And they were provided with a lot of information up front, and the process was pretty much made clear. And as I watched this committee, it was up to a committee member to provide the members with definitions and handouts. And there has not been clear guidance as to the resolution that was passed by the county board as to what this committee was supposed to do or the materials that you need to help make informed decisions. So the other thing is the timing of minutes coming out rather late after this committee meets. And in this first red line version, that if I were serving on this committee, I would have a real hard time working from meeting to meeting, trying to figure out what was it that we actually did the last meeting and what I'd like to do this meeting. So if maybe you keep the process in mind and move it along a little better for your next meeting, you will be able to wrap up sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. Harkening back to definitions and uses acted on in meetings 2 and 3, and discussion possible action on item number 17. So you do have in front of you at least Pete and, did you say Steve Binding was on? No, Steve? Okay, so just Pete. Hopefully you can follow along.
Yep.
All right, good. And you got a red line version here attached to the definitions. And I will open it up from there. Mr. Kurtzwell.
Just a quick comment. I don't know if we have to clean up the resort definition to exclude some of the Wisconsin Department stuff too. Is that different now, Jay, than what it usually was? I mean, I think the old definition was referencing these seller's permits. That's not really what the county does right now too, or?
Right, so I guess I'd like to go over a few things that I guess we should probably have this committee re-establish. You did say you wanted to keep the same definition of resort. The Wisconsin Department of Health and Family Services doesn't hold the power for licensing of a resort. So as you see in the red line version as part of the corrections, that was then changed to the Wisconsin Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection.
Thank
So that
you.
is one, I would call it a minor change because it's just referencing a different entity of the state.
Right, I understand that.
yeah.
Thank you.
And then the other one that I did add is that this committee did vote that they wanted the definition of tourist rooming house added into the zoning ordinance. That tourist rooming house definition comes from the Health and Human Service Department's definition of tourist rooming house. The tourist rooming house definition, though, also references short-term rental. We don't have a definition in the zoning ordinance of short-term rental, so I also grabbed HHS's definition of short-term rental to put it in here. If a definition is going to reference another definition, you should bring both definitions in with you, or with it.
And that's consistent across,
It's consistent with HHS's tourist rooming house ordinance. And again, the motion from this committee was to take that tourist rooming house definition. Again, the tourist rooming house definition also states short-term rental. The zoning ordinance doesn't have that definition, so again, I grabbed their definition.
And since, I mean, we don't have the definition of short-term rental, I mean, do you have what the HHS definition of a short-term rental is then? So we know
Yes.
what that is? Okay. Because I mean, yeah, we don't have that in our handout, so.
It's in the red line version.
Oh, in red line.
So it's in
Thank you.
addition in the red line. Yep. And then the kind of only other things I do have is kind of asterisks on the current ordinance one. Again, we have this definition of dwelling multifamily. The only time that definition reference shows back up is within the R1 zone district under conditional uses. It calls for multifamily, 3 or more dwellings. I don't know if the intention was to delete this dwelling multifamily and multifamily and just replace it with our multi-dwelling development definition that we came up with, or if they are as something different. My note there says, should dwelling multifamily be deleted and replaced with the new definition of multifamily dwelling? If so, then language in 17.1, parent B, parent 1 should also change to reflect that definition. I don't know if you want to piecemeal these out or if you want me to continue through some of the other asterisk items that I have there.
Let's squelch that one right away as long as we're on it. So basically, we've got the definition for dwelling multifamily, which is only in the R1 zone district. We've got multifamily dwelling on as number 71. And again, as dwelling multifamily. So one should go away.
I thought we had already kind of concurred that multi-dwelling development was gonna go away. And multifamily was gonna kind of describe 3 or more dwelling units, on a lot for multifamily. I guess that's where I'm a little confused.
So I guess my question is, should every reference of multifamily be replaced with multifamily dwelling? And every reference of multi-dwelling development also be replaced with multifamily dwelling?
No, I don't think so, but that's why I thought we were gonna kind of go back in here and decide, because again, I know according to this handout I have or the Muni code, under R1, it does say uses authorized for conditional use multifamily, 3 or more dwelling units. So I understand, I think that's what you're saying, that it's allowed under R1, under a conditional use, not a permitted use. So, and then yes, I see that on R1, I do not see multifamily as a conditional use.
No, it is not. That's
Right.
where I guess that language was replaced with multi-dwelling development, which we got rid of that definition.
And I guess just from my opinion, I think, if we're gonna delete the whole term of multi-dwelling development, then we look back at whether, the things that are covered underneath it, hotel, motel, resort, should be plugged in there as opposed to just throwing everything under a multifamily dwelling, but that's my opinion on that.
And delete the other one.
Well, again, we have 2 separate things here. We have multi-dwelling development and we have this multifamily, dwelling, multifamily. So those are 2 separate things. I think we all agreed on our definition for a multifamily. And it seemed that we were mostly in agreement about deleting the term multi-dwelling development. Now, the multi-dwelling development in certain zone districts is an umbrella. There's other things that fall under that umbrella. So the question is now is taking pieces under that umbrella and putting them back in those zone districts if we think that's the right thing. I mean, piecemeal as opposed to, again, putting everything under this umbrella of multifamily. Because I think multifamily and multi-dwelling development are kind of different to some extent. Because again, we defined multifamily from what I understand. And again, multi-dwelling development was an all-encompassing, it encompassed hotel, motel, resort, and condos. So I think have them stand alone individually, whether they're permitted uses or conditional uses under a zone district, as opposed to having a umbrella of multifamily and then adding things underneath that.
So
That's like in parentheses as multi-dwelling development is. That's my opinion. Just one at a time, as opposed to under an umbrella.
So you'd rather do away with the umbrella of multi-dwelling
Correct.
and add in resorts, motels, hotels?
I think it depends again on the zone district, because again, in R1 right now, under, number 15 is multi-dwelling development. And in parentheses, it says new condominium, hotel, motel, or resort, or other development which is in the same general scale or character. So again, these are allowed, resorts and condos and hotels, motels are allowed on R1 under the umbrella of multi-dwelling development. Is that correct, Jay? I mean, so it seems to me that those had to fit into the requirements of the multi-dwelling development, which was 3 or more. Okay, So if we're going to do away with multi-dwelling development, which it seems that we want to do, and that terminology, now the question is, do we want to allow hotels, motels, and resorts on our R1? And if so, we plug them in to uses under conditional uses where they would be right now, or we don't. That's kind of what I thought we were going to do.
Right, and that does make sense to me. I guess I didn't want to jump into that one yet because there is still a clerical aspect that I have questions as it relates to the R1 zone district where it has under authorized by conditional use this multifamily.
Right.
And are we then keeping the definition of this dwelling multifamily? Those are the ones that kind of still connect. However, there is a correlation there where if you read that multifamily is for 3 or more dwelling units, and then you read back up in the definition, a dwelling or group of dwellings on one plot containing separate living quarters for 2 or more families. Whether or not we change that definition, whether or not we swap that definition with, let me make sure I pronounce the right ones, because there's a lot of different terms, multifamily dwelling. I guess that's where I'd want to start is what do we do with just in the R1 zone district? Once we figure that out, then we can move back to the multi-dwelling development, which was now stricken from the ordinance, and whether or not we do the piecemealing of those other items.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're saying you just want clarification between the number 30 on your list here, multifamily dwelling, which is a dwelling or group of dwellings on one plot containing separate living quarters for 2 or more families, but which may have joint services. And then under 17(1)B, parent 1, multifamily, which is 3 or more dwelling units.
I need clarification on that.
Okay, and that's, yeah, for the R1 zone district.
Yes.
And again, having these two definitions floating around seem very conflicting too.
Right.
So we should pick one or the other. Yeah, there you go. We pick one or the other and then decide with the R1, about fixing that. So,
I mean, in the definition that you approved for multifamily dwelling is an apartment building, row house, townhouse, condominium, or manufactured building is defined with Wisconsin statutes 101.71 parent 6 that does not exceed 35 feet in height or 3 stories, and that consists of 3 or more attached dwelling units. The initial construction of which begun January 1, 1993, multifamily dwelling does not include facility license under WSStat Chapter 50.
I would recommend that we go with that, and looking at this current multifamily dwelling, it says for living quarters for 2 or more. Well, that's covered under what a dwelling is, because we can say that can be a 1 or 2 family. So there it's allowed 2 families. But now if you're talking 3 or more, that's falling under the multifamily definition that we just came up with. Does that make sense to anyone?
It does.
Mr. Bassett?
Yeah, just to make my thinking clear, I do believe we should follow the state ordinance as close as possible. But after having disagreed with that with the committee, I've thought a lot about it. And I think the only thing that would supersede that would be clarification, making our ordinance common sense, easy readable, understandable. I think that comes over the following the state ordinance, just to make it clear. Thank you.
Okay, so we're still looking at multifamily dwelling as a definition and dwelling, multifamily. So I think it would be redundant to leave them both in there.
I guess my recommendation would be the one that we worked on that was based on the state stats and multifamily 3 or more. And do away with the dwelling, multifamily. Does anyone else have a thought on that?
So how would the change read?
We wouldn't have these 2 terms floating around. We're cleaning one of them up, from my understanding.
Yes.
And we're taking the term that we all worked on.
Which was existing language
From the state.
from the state.
And this is one of the clarifications that I needed. And I have no issues with deleting number 30 of definition altogether. And then basically replacing 17.1, parent B, parent 1 with multifamily dwelling.
Get it? I get it. And thank you for your help clarifying everything, Jay.
Okay.
multifamily dwelling starts with 3 or more.
That's what, yeah, yep. So I guess I'm gonna make a motion here that we do away with this dwelling comma multifamily definition, and we go with the multifamily, which is consisting of 3 or more that this ad hoc committee worked with.
71 is listed on your, yep,
Yes,
on your sheet.
well, 71 is multi-dwelling development.
So we've got a motion on the table. Let's have a second to that motion right here.
Second it.
Seconded by Ms. Delaney. And then we can have discussion. Hello, Mr. Buchholz. So basically, eliminating number 30, dwelling multifamily, using the definition we worked on, which is the state definition, which is number 71 on the first page of the red line.
Yep.
Mr. Sutton.
So I'm coming in after the fact, I apologize for that, but, so dwelling comma multifamily, it is redundant. And if I'm understanding correctly, in 17.1, multifamily is 3 or more and dwelling unit is 1 to 2,
No.
or just 1.
Go ahead.
Dwelling unit is 1. A dwelling can consist of 1 or 2 dwelling units. So that covered under dwelling. And then, because I didn't see this right away, thank you, Dale. On the second page of our handout, because I was looking at 17(1)(b)(2). If you flip the page at number 71 there, the multifamily dwelling is what this ad hoc committee is recommending to have for 3 or more. So yes, if you have 1 dwelling with two dwelling units, each unit is single. You can have a single family or a 2-family home that's under the dwelling definition. And now if we start talking more than 3, or 3 or more, it's getting to be the multifamily dwelling.
Okay, so that 2 separate dwellings.
I think the multifamily would be 3 or more attached dwelling units, so it'd be like a triplex even, or anything
Right.
getting to be like that, yeah.
But the single family, the dwelling units is plural. So that means 1 or 2.
I think where the confusion comes up about that is dwelling, which is from the state, says 1 or 2 family in their definition. So I don't think we're gonna be able to override that definition. So this would be 3 or more.
So, yeah, and you're talking about the definition number 29, dwelling, any building that contains 1 or 2 dwelling units, right? Is that what we're talking about here then?
Yes.
Yes, so it's 1 dwelling unit or 2 dwelling units. So, I mean, yeah, I think dwelling is just 1 or 2 units, which could be single family homes each inside that unit.
Yeah, I like Mr. Bassett's, his, form of it by keeping it simple.
All right.
Yep, I do too.
And most of this stuff is all from the state. I mean,
Yeah.
most of this stuff we're just taking from the
It's
state.
still in one envelope, still in one house, one box, but we're just not gonna be able to override that definition. Could be, it could also be a mother-in-law wing, it could be a, top and bottom. I saw a picture chart once, is it 1 down here and 1 over the top, 2 side by side? They have to be in the same building envelope though. And, we kind of discussed this before about what are the chances, maybe not chances, that's not the right word, but are people going to want to put something in with more than 1 dwelling unit in it? Probably not. Once you own your little slice of heaven, you don't want to share it with anybody. So, we're looking at 3 or more with multifamily dwelling.
And again, just to clarify here, we're talking about deleting the 30 definition dwelling, comma, multifamily, and replacing it with number 71 multifamily dwelling. That was,
That was a motion in the
Yep.
second.
there was yep, just want to be clear, everyone knows what we're voting on.
Any more discussion on that? The motion was to eliminate number 30, the second page of the red line, dwelling multifamily, and instead use number 71, which is on the first page of the red line, multifamily dwelling.
And then also replace 17.1, parent B, parent 1 with multi-family dwelling.
We haven't gotten there yet. It
Oh.
wasn't part of the motion, but we're on our way.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Bassett? And then we will move on to using that definition in the zone district uses. So the first one would be in 17.1, which is residential 1 district. Uses authorized by conditional use, multifamily. And this is your note here that's in the strikeout?
Yeah. Yes, and then ultimately, if we don't have that definition because we just deleted it, we should probably replace that then with multi-family dwelling.
Does that make sense to everybody? Is that the only other place it appears?
That is, so it does appear in PUD zone district. Let me see where that reference is here again.
And was there a reason why it was only a conditional use in R1 and not RR1 or RR2? I mean,
So I think the initial intention was that in RR1 and RR2, that is where you would have that multi-dwelling development. That was that condo, hotel, motel, resort, condominium. I believe in the R1, that is where you would have more of just separate units on one lot for more of affordable housing opportunities. Which, again, this would still be the same thing because you could have 3. I guess it's just, the way I would end up viewing this though, is if someone came in within the R1 and even RR1 and RR2, even non-shoreland, and they said, I want to do 2 separate dwelling units on one lot. Even though their lot was large, there would be no avenue to do it. You could do it for 3 or more, or otherwise you just need to physically split the lot. That would be the only implication that I see from this. The only other time that multifamily is even referenced in the zoning ordinance is in PUD district, where it then states, and I have it up on the screen, yeah, it is sharing, it's probably really tough to read though, it's even tough for me to read right now. Plans for the proposed development shall be submitted in duplicate and shall show the size, location, proposed use of all structures and land, including the areas involved. The plan may provide it for a combination of single and multifamily development, as well as it relates to commercial uses. So if we were going to change 17.1, parent B, parent 1, this multifamily, replace it with multifamily dwelling, you may want to change this multifamily development to multifamily dwelling in 17.11, which is referenced in the PUD zone
for
district.
the consistency, to make
Right.
sure all the terms of.
Otherwise, you're having terms out there that really don't relate back to the
Aren't-
definition
aren't
anymore.
defined.
So does anyone on this ad hoc committee have an issue with replacing, allowing multifamily on R1 as it is currently under the old definition? I mean, 'cause that's what we're talking about here is just, we're talking about plugging, replacing that right now. So just to get that cleaned up.
Minimum lot size for R1 zone district, only if they're sewered does it drop down to 50 feet, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so only if they're sewered, like in Sand Lake, Stone Lake, I should say, where that's R1. So the lots can be 50 feet wide, but they have to be sewered to be 50 feet wide.
And density is still something on the agenda.
Yeah,
Well, that's because it's a platted unincorporated village.
it is the PUD before there was a PUD. A planned unit development before there was a plan to make Stone Lake. So, yeah, I like it for consistency's sake. And that would be by conditional use. That is not a
Permitted use.
permitted use, so it would still have to go to the, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say it's gotta go to the towns, but,
Well, I think that same condition is right in the Edgewater, right where the store and all that stuff used to be. There's small lots there too.
yep. Yeah, I believe that is R1 down there.
So do we want to okay, we're talking about replacing, we just made a recommendation to go with our definition for multifamily dwelling. Do we want to replace this, make sure that is in place under R1? Swap that with what's there now under the conditional uses for R1
And in Bud District.
and in the PUD ordinance. What does everyone think about that?
I think you sort of have to, don't you?
I-
And the reason being is because we have 30-foot lots in Bass Lake. So that would restrict it if you do.
It would. But even though they're 30 by 60s, I think.
30 by 100.
Are they 30 by 100? I think some of them might be a little smaller than that for some reason. But regardless, it takes 7 lots to build
Right.
down there. So. So I guess if you don't want to change both of the definitions to multifamily dwelling in R1 and in the PUD, we can do away with the definition because that's the only time it's listed is in those 2 areas. And it is a conditional use in the R1. Is that trying to read it off the screen here.
This is the reference.
This is the reference in the PUD where again, it says multifamily development. We got rid of multifamily development. So I'll just say it would be my recommendation, you replace multifamily development with multifamily dwelling in 17.1 as it relates to PUD to be consistent with the definitions you came up with. And then here in the R1 zone district, you would replace multifamily and specifically just call it multifamily dwelling. You don't even have to relate to the 3 or more because we have a definition for multifamily dwellings.
And that would still allow the ability to have multifamily dwelling as well as where it is currently used as multifamily. Correct?
Right, that's just as the conditional use
Right.
permit. Multifamily dwelling basically means for 3 or more. Permitted uses within that zone district still are for 1 and 2 family year-round dwellings.
Okay, we're never gonna get anywhere today. I'm making a motion that we go with the definition that we have for multifamily dwelling and put that under as a conditional use for R1 and change the wording in the PUD language.
I second.
Thank
Motion
you.
made by Ben, seconded by Bond. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Let's keep chucking along on this.
So I mean, the next one, because we got rid of multi-dwelling development. So multi-dwelling development was then referenced in 17.2, which is the RR1 zone district, and 17.3, which is the RR2 zone district under uses authorized by conditional use. So we were going to, plug in place our new definition of multi-family dwellings in that point, or in that spot. But again, multi-dwelling development also referenced hotels, motels, and resorts. So there in my asterisk on the first page at the bottom, so there's no definition for hotel, motel. Should a state definition be added? If multi-dwelling development is removed and replaced within the ordinance, should hotel, motel be added back within the RR1 and the R2 zone district as a CUP? If not, then section 6.10 needs to be altered. The only other place that it's shown for hotel motel is as a permitted use in the commercial zone district. So this is another discussion item that I need from this committee to decide what we do with that.
So big picture, where do hotels and motels belong? We can figure that out and work backwards. Do they belong in residential?
Mr. Speaker, I would say no. To me, that hotel motel should be put into the city application. Because I think if you just start doing multi-dwellings in other places, that comes under some other jurisdiction in the ordinances. So I personally feel that motel, hotel should be in the town's application, city application, in my opinion.
Okay. Commercial property?
Should we have definitions to know what we're saying? Because I mean, do we have a county definition at all for a hotel motel? Either one. And we have a state definition for a hotel and motel. So maybe we should adopt those definitions and then we can go from there, but I concur, I guess, for the most part with that, with the idea of commercial.
So you want to adopt those definitions first of what a hotel and a motel is? And you said there is this readily available state one?
There is, I don't know if I can find it here or not. I looked at it before. I didn't put it on this though. Did you have one before, Ben? Yeah, here's one from chapter 97. Hotel means all places where sleeping accommodations are offered for pay to transients in 5 or more rooms, and all places used in connection therewith. Hotel keeper, motel keeper, and innkeeper are synonymous with inn, motel, and hotel are synonymous. That is chapter 97's definition. ATCP 72 has a definition. They basically leave off the rest of that last sentence. Hotel in ATCP 72 means a place wherein sleeping accommodations are offered for pay to transients in 5 or more rooms and all places used within a building or structure. Kind of like 97s, because anytime I get to use the word there within, it's always fun.
Well, it's in the ordinance under 6.10 motels, but we don't define what a motel is. So we should probably get a definition.
And then if you were wanting them just in the commercial zone district, then we do have to make some corrections to 6.10 as well, because that does reference that kind of the density aspects within an R1 zone district.
Again, just looking at the definition, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems the major difference in a hotel motel is it furnishes on-premises parking for motor vehicles. I mean, that seems almost what the only difference is. And doesn't every hotel also provide parking for on premises. So I mean, I guess traditionally, you know, as a kid, I always thought a motel was something that was kind of spread out with the units on the side, and hotels are stacked up. So, but according to the state definition here, it's, the only difference seems to be a motel furnishes on premises parking for motor vehicles of guests as part of the room charge for guests. So.
Who would have thought?
Should we have a definition that encompasses both hotels and motels and just say this is the same definition for them, or do we want to have a different definition? Thoughts on that,
Yeah.
anyone?
If all they reference there is the difference being parking, I mean, then I think we can have one definition.
I would
And
concur.
since 6.10 already references motels, I think you should almost make the state definition read motel. And then if you want to make a definition for hotel, it says see motel.
Yeah,
Bob, do you have something to say?
Yeah, they're basically the same. They both have to furnish parking for their residents. So, yeah, let's not mess it up.
we'll just do it motel.
Okay.
You want to read that one again, Jay, or put it up on the board or something?
It would take me a while to put it on the board, but motel
Yeah.
as per chapter 97.01 definitions, number 7, a motel means all places wherein sleeping accommodations are offered for pay to transients in 5 or more rooms, and all places used in connection therewith.
And this would mean, I guess, just for clarification, that if you have less than 5 rooms, it would fall under the boarding house. Or there was another definition I thought that we had for, I'm sorry, tourist rooming house, I guess, for transients. So I thought a boarding house was people who are local or citizens maybe, so. So I mean, we're cutting it at 5, so if someone rents off 4 rooms, I guess it's just more of a private thing, and once this makes it official as a hotel motel, I guess, state definition, just trying to clarify. Thank
Right,
you.
and really those are just, again, the state breakdown in that 5 or more, and that those are separate keyed units as well. I mean, if
So it would fall under a tourist rooming house?
No, I guess I was just asking a question here, because it says a hotel is defined as a place to sleep where your sleeping accommodations are offered to pay for transients. It doesn't really say, it doesn't define it as separate keyed entries. It just says 5 or more rooms. So, but, I mean, we know what we're talking about here, but we're talking about having 5 or more units. It's gonna make it a hotel
Right.
motel.
in clarification, we did get back from DAG-CAP, and this is in reference with HHS. It is as keyed units, where if you were renting, you know, a room in your house to a roommate or something like that, I mean, you're not classified as a hotel motel. Even if you're renting 2 or 3 rooms out in your house to, you know, to guests, you're not a hotel motel. But if you have, you know, 5 separate keyed entrances to your house, you have a downstairs, an upstairs, a side stairs, this, you know, back area, that could be viewed as a hotel because you have separate keyed entrances, separate units in that building.
And yeah, I guess my question was just, is there any definition of a place that if it meets this definition, except it's 4 rooms? I mean, that'd be a resort, I guess, to some extent?
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured, so, all right, thank you.
Mr. Bassett?
I don't understand this real well. So under 6.1, if you want to build a motel, you need 2,000 square feet to put a 10, and if you put under the example at the end of the paragraph, a 10-unit motel on there, and you add 5,000 square feet for each parked car, how do you put the septic system in there if it's out in the township where there are no governmental sewage systems? You'd have to have the system on site. I don't know, can you put a septic system under a parking lot? There's questions here that don't make sense. I just don't get it.
6.10 still needs to change. I guess first we're kind of coming up with a definition to plug in for motel. And then we'll go to the actual meat of the ordinance because section 6.10 then does need to change as well. Because ultimately, if we're just wanting motels in a commercial zone district, that language of 6.10 has got to change anyways.
Yeah, agreed. So you want to adopt the definition and then we'll, now that we all know what a motel is.
I make a motion to adopt the state definition for motel, hotel.
I'll second.
Motion by Laura, second by Mr. Strandland. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Then we can move on. You want to keep on going on motels?
Yeah, we probably should. So 6.10 says motels shall be constructed or located on a lot that meets the following dimensional requirements. Again, if your intent is to, and as of right now, from what this ad hoc committee has previously motioned and approved, you would not be able to do a hotel or motel within an RR1, RR2, or R1 zone district, period. It would be a prohibited use. It would be allowed, I'd have to look if it's an allowed use or it's got to be a cup still in commercial, I would hope.
I don't think so.
Is it permitted in
I
commercial?
think it is, yes.
It is a permitted use within commercial. But again, this language says that it shall be the base minimum parcel size and lot width of the zone district in which it is to be located plus 5,000 square feet of area for every unit over one, any additional area required by Wisconsin Administrative Code. And then it has this, for example, I definitely think you would want to change this, for example, because the example references the RR1 zone district, which that can be very confusing because we're not allowing them within the RR1 zone district. But this starts to creep into the realm of those density considerations where we have to have additional discussion as well. I think for a motel, 5,000 square feet for every additional unit over one probably makes sense. I think all the other, I guess, example language there is palatable to me. I don't know why you'd want to go and change something that was already, in there, but just make the reference that we pull that RR1 zone district out of there, basically replace it with C because they're not going to be allowed in the RR1.
And this is just under B1, the first conditional use under commercial you're talking about, right? Where it sucks. I'm looking at public and semi-public conditional uses stated in the R1 district. All right, you're looking at the number 12 recreation service oriented facilities in R1. Which part in the R1 are you talking about commercial that you're saying is also mentioning R1?
In 6.10,
Oh, 6, okay, thank you.
So if we're saying that motels belong in the commercial zone district,
that's fine.
you want to just remove that reference for RR1 and just say they are only available to put in commercial zone district.
Because there it would be removed, there it would be removed, there it would be removed. C1 is a permitted use, and then it references back to what you need to have for density requirements already to do a motel in 6.10. And that's all the references of it, so.
So how would 6.10 change if you took out your the for example, everything after that?
I guess that's just the example. The only thing I would say is that, for example, a proposed 10-unit motel in the non-shorelands of a C1 zone district would require 20,000 square feet and a minimum of 100 foot plus 45,000 square feet, 9 times 5,000. This would equal 65,000 square feet or 1.49 acres. The motel should meet the minimum setback requirements. Because you wouldn't want to keep that RR1 in there because now you're
Right.
prohibiting them in
Yep.
RR1. So that'd just be confusing for a layman trying to read through that example.
Agreed. Your light came off.
My questions were answered and I agree we're cleaning stuff up here, but, you know,
We all on board with that then?
I think you'd want to do it two motions. One is basically prohibit motels in anything other than commercial. And then as either two-part or two separate parts, change 6.10 to reference C1.
Okay, say that last sentence, please.
Change this 6.1, the example it says here, says example RR1. The example would be in C1, commercial one, because that's all that's left.
Example would stay in class.
Right, but you also want to make a full motion to, I guess, prohibit hotels, motels from all districts other than C1.
Everything is commercial.
Yep,
Correct.
Excuse me, Chairman.
done.
Do we have any hotels, motels that are in RR1 currently? So would they have to change?
They would end up be considered a non-conforming use. Yep.
How many?
I know one for sure because it was just up for sale. It's just outside of town. It's got the red roof on it. It's not called, what is it called?
Northern,
Yeah, something like that. They're in an R1 zone district. It's just south of the Edelweiss Motel. Edelweiss is commercial, but there's one like two parcels to the south of that that is zoned R1.
and I think the other one potentially is the one down on Sand Lake by the old Maximilians. What else is
Sure.
that called now? There's an old, I mean, that thing has been, nobody's used it in, no, 28 years since I've been here.
Yeah, Treelands has a hotel. There's one up on Nelson Lake. Those are not zoned commercial.
Treelands is as part of a resort.
Right, but they do have a physical motel block there.
Yeah. I think we might be conflating, because if it's in a resort, is it really a motel? Does this turn resorts into motels?
I don't think so. I think Mr. Bassett wants to say something though.
Okay, Mr. Bassett?
Oh, just out of curiosity's sake, isn't 5,000 square feet for a vehicle or whatever awfully excessive? One vehicle figuring 25 feet long, 12 feet wide for the doors to swing. And maybe you bring two cars, you meet your girlfriend there or something. You know, we're only talking 300 feet per square. And I know you need a driveway in. Are we being extremely excessive with 5,000 or is there something here I don't get?
I think that's that's the land size that you require, so that would be the building, everything. Yeah, so that's for the unit and everything associated with it.
So the 5,000 includes the building? Their share of the building?
Yeah. Which,
I
I think
would
it's
never
still,
guess that by reading this.
it's still quite a bit. How big's a motel room? I mean, 10 by 20, something like that, I suppose. So they're only a couple hundred square feet, a few hundred more to park your car and,
Normal hotel room, having laid carpeting and thousands of them are normally about 25 feet long, minus the corner where we have the bathroom.
so
12 feet wide, so one piece of carpet.
I don't think 5,000 square feet is onerous.
Okay,
And that's, well, I was gonna say a discussion for another day, but,
I'm ready for the vote, Mr. Chairman.
all right, we need a motion.
I was just gonna say, it seems that the consensus around here was to prohibit the hotels, motels, and anything other than commercial, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounded like there may be a handful of nonconformities. I mean, a handful. It's not, we named 4 or 5 maybe. So sounds like that's something that is reasonable.
Mr. Chair, so if they got these existing ones, are we gonna force them to change them or are they permitted under stat?
No, it's, they're
So
called
they should be.
existing non-conforming.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah, so what does end up happening with existing non-conforming, if you have an existing non-conforming motel, and let's say they now want to add additional units, that would be a no-go. Then they would need to rezone to a commercial zone district, provided that they meet the minimum density requirements to add additional units still. But other than that, no, it's not forcing them to change into a different zone district. It's just prohibiting them from further expanding upon that use.
So if we make a motion stating that to prohibit all hotels, motels from all districts except commercial, is that acceptable what you're looking for, sir?
Or all new ones. Or
All new.
we're gonna differentiate all new ones, I guess, yeah.
So amend my motion to make it to prohibit all new hotel, motels from all districts except commercial property.
And that was motion?
Mhm.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Laura. Everybody kind of clear on that? So we're, Sarah?
Sorry, if you use the word new, do you have to put in a date at which point the new ordinance takes effect? Or do you just leave it, use is prohibited except in commercial?
Yeah, you wouldn't need to necessarily specify a date. The date would ultimately default to when, if and when county board would adopt the ratification of the zoning ordinance amendment. That would set a date.
All right. Then all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else in our definitions?
That motion also includes me the ability to go back into 6.1 and replace RR1 with C1. Thank you.
Yes.
That was kind of all that I had. I guess yeah, that was all that I had. Now, I did add some other stuff in reference to what this committee, previously voted on. So I do have to go into the shoreland ordinance. Again, we changed dwelling, we changed dwelling units. We now have this multifamily dwelling. Resorts stays the same, less the dad cap insertion versus Wisconsin Family Services or whatever it used to reference. We added TRH, tourist rooming house. I then went back in and added short-term rental because tourist rooming house references short-term rental and we don't have a definition. I plugged short-term rental definition from the HHS ordinance, which is where we got our tourist rooming house ordinance. We added bed and breakfast, which is the state definition. We removed dwelling multifamily. Went into shoreland ordinance and then added prohibited uses. That was this committee's determination, recommendation, discussion, motion to remove multifamily dwelling and two-family dwellings from the shoreland district. So I went into shoreland and under prohibited uses, put those definitions in there. I didn't have those definitions in shoreland ordinance, so I'm also adding those definitions into the shoreland ordinance. The only other one to consider, it's similar to motel, and that is resort. Where again, if we're removing multi-dwelling development from the RR1 and RR2 zone district as a use authorized by conditional use, should there still be an avenue or a pathway to a resort in that zone district or any other zone district? Right now, even C1, I don't think references it.
Probably not.
No, I mean, you've already reaffirmed everything I talked about up until, yeah, up until resort. And we can save that for another discussion. We can continue on with our agenda. I'll leave that up to your discretion, Chair.
Chairman. sort of asked me. I would like to leave it in RR1.
Most of them are in RR2, the majority.
Okay. Then leave it in RR2. Not go commercial.
Here's the other concern I have now. So multi-dwelling development, which is what the umbrella that we had hotel, motel, resort under before, was for 3 or more. Our definition of a resort right now, as I believe as the county's acting on it, is more than one, renting out more than one. So I guess my concern is here looking if it was only allowed under R1, under the multi-dwelling development umbrella, that meant a new resort would logically have to be 3 or more units to fit under that umbrella.
Yes.
However, since we've taken out that umbrella and we allow a resort there, that would mean more than one. So it does seem like it seems to me then if we allow a resort on a standalone, so we're all clear, if we allow a resort as a standalone use, whether conditional or permitted, it is for anything more than one. It's not going to be 3 or more like it was under the multi-dwelling development umbrella. Is everyone following me there? And Jay, am I correct?
Yeah, and then my head's kind of snowballing a little bit with that because, resort is ultimately a use. It's the rental of those units. So what's to say someone that wants to have a 2-unit resort, let's say we want a pathway to have a 2-unit resort as they want to rent both of those, and now they sell to me and I don't want to rent them both. Now I have 2 dwelling units on one lot as a multifamily dwelling. A multifamily dwelling is for 3 or more.
That's right.
It becomes a snowball problematic effect real quick.
And again, even condominium, which is a form of ownership, was under the former multi-dwelling development umbrella, and that's just a form of ownership. So again, we had use, ownership, and hotel motel all lumped in under this multi-dwelling development umbrella. And we thought, again, we made a decision for the sake of clarification and simplicity, let's do away with this umbrella. Let's do away with the umbrella and then figure out where the parts of the umbrella fit underneath. And this is one of the concerns I have now if we're doing, it seemed that a new resort or a resort under R1, or I don't know if R2 is under the same multi-dwelling development. It would mean that a new hotel, motel, resort, technically would have to have 3 or more units. And now this, as Jay mentioned, now there's this issue of people who have maybe 2, units on a lot, they're legal, but then they can rent them both. And this opens up the door to me of a lot of these accessory dwelling units that we haven't talked about yet, that if some of them can be legal, non-conforming structures on top of a garage, and then you have your lake house. And what happens, if you rent out 1, it's right to rent law. You rent out 2, that's technically a resort. And now if we open that up on RR1, it seems we can open up potentially hundreds of new resorts if someone wants to rent out both units at the same time. And I think that's an unintended consequence that we have to look at here too. That's why allowing a resort of more than 1 on R1 or R1, RR2 or R1, RR1, and maybe even RR2 going forward, you're gonna have to look at those consequences because it's not gonna be, it could be anything more than 1 to make a resort technically now. So this is a lot to unpack with the resort, and it's a big issue.
It's taking me a minute to absorb all that. So I guess, speaking for myself, we all think of a resort with one kind of picture of it, 5 cabins, the lodge, on water, but that's technically, like Mr. Kurzweil said, is not what we're defining it as. And there is no state definition for a resort, if I remember correctly. And I was gonna say, who would want to put in a 2-unit resort, but didn't you have one by your house?
And with all of the legal non-conforming apartments over garages, now what stops someone from saying, I want to rent out both of them? I can, I'm renting out the house for Airbnbs, but now I can rent out 2 units, maximize the profit. And then you're running it all through the same septic, the residential septic too. I mean, I'm just saying it opens up a potential Pandora's box with the current definitions of resort.
Yeah, that's not something we want to see happen. What would happen if somebody tried to rent out both? They have a unpermitted garage addition or, above the garage type of thing. What would be the repercussions to that?
Currently, HHS, the overseer of the tourist rooming house ordinance, is not granting licenses to those second units. Those that are doing it behind closed doors, I don't know how we'd ever catch. But yeah, if someone had 2 existing dwelling units on one lot and they came in and said, I want to rent out both of those dwelling units, HHS is not giving licenses for both of them right now. They're only giving licenses to one.
We put on there that they had to be separated and totally individual constructions. Would that clean that up?
Well, in this case, it would be separate individual construction.
And here we are talking about zoning stuff, and we're putting a lot of stuff on HHS. To say HHS is gonna have, I mean, I don't foresee this, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but if I did one of these second structures illegally, again, over 10 years ago, and without certain actions taken, they have become legal non-conforming structures. I think the county if I want to rent that out, I don't know how the county's gonna stop me. I mean, you guys are saying you're not issuing them right now, but if someone wanted to make an issue about it, they're gonna file a suit, and I don't know how you're gonna say no to it because it's a legal non-conforming structure.
Well,
So,
for how many years have you been stamping those garages with a bonus room above them with no habitable space?
Long time.
20 years?
Yeah.
So if they're relatively new, Kathy will stamp them with a red stamp that says no habitable space. What does it say?
Non-habitable space allowed.
Accessory.
no habitable living area shall be created in this accessory structure.
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
Mhm.
I don't.
I know.
That's what I
So,
forgot.
but I'm just being honest with you as an assessor. Every summer, every building season, there's more of those that are becoming legal non-conforming. Because this isn't something that just started under Jay. It's been going on since the 1990s.
Are they legal non-conforming if they've been stamped though, that says you can't have habitable space?
From what I understand, if it says no habitable living area shall be constructed and you construct habitable living area, after 10 years, if there has not been enforcement from the authority to say you cannot do that, they become legal non-conforming.
And that might be a question we want to propose to legal, depending on what this committee, determines, because there is a difference between use and a difference between the statute that you're referencing, which specifically references a structure, where if you created a patio that was too close to the water and basically zoning didn't catch it for 10 years, it becomes an existing non-conforming structure, which now zoning can't come back in and say, you need to remove that. State definitions and state statutes now allow you to keep that, and furthermore, it allows you to replace it back into the same footprint. It's just asinine why legislators would have had that language in state statutes, but there you go. Use is a different classification, and that's one that I've always, because I have a few of these on my my order for corrections, and we'll see what they come out to be, because we actually have an attorney that's fighting that exact language, and they have an order for correction of like June 1, where they illegally built a living quarters above a garage. They're renting out their main house, and now they're living in the garage. I say you can't be living in the garage. It was stamped as no habitable area, and their attorney's fighting it that, well, it's been there for over 10 years, so state statutes allow that. So we'll probably end up getting some case law determined from this as well.
Right. And honestly, I've got places where I have, for a pole shed, don't have a living area, and there's a mailbox there. That's what I do is mail. I mean, It's just how it is, and it's hard, I understand, enforcement and use. That's the hardest part of your guys' job, to go out and figure out if people are using the property correctly or not. I mean, you guys don't have the manpower for that, but that's one of the issues. Like I said, there's ongoing legal with this, so I would err on the side of caution with what we're doing with resort. I would almost recommend maybe tabling this and see if we can do any more progress, or is this the last issue on our real list of things to do?
Yeah, until we get to density, yes.
The resort issue is a big one.
Does anybody need to take a 5-minute, or are we good?
I'd be happy to take a 3 or 4, but and I'm the young guy in the room, so
Let's take a 3-minute recess until 1:15.
thank you, sir.
All right, and we're gonna call the meeting back to order. And we're gonna move on. So as an agenda item for next time, we will tilt at that windmill about having a resort with 2 units.
And the other thing, go ahead.
Where to allow permitted and conditional uses for resorts, we're gonna determine that too, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the one other thing, yeah, you would want to look at is that if someone wants to apply for a resort, I guess, how they do it, what zone district does it have to be in? Should it be as a conditional use permit? But then you also have to realize that in today's culture, there's a lot of condominiums that are out there. Again, those are separate units. It's as a form of ownership, but it's on one parcel of land, one condominium plat of land. And what we're seeing a lot of today, which we're needing clarification on, is unit A doesn't rent, unit B wants to rent out to someone else, unit C doesn't rent, unit D wants to rent out to someone else. Now we have 2 rentals on one parcel of land. Is that something that we can allow? Because they're each different owners.
So can that not be done through the planned unit development part then, where it's kind of a mixed use? I thought, and again, I don't know all the details about that, but I thought that might be an avenue. Why aren't condos kind of run through the planned unit development thing in the first place? Because that seems like it would be a logical place to put that.
Condominium, these are of existing units, and there is no requirements in state statutes that require additional zoning approval for a change of ownership. These are existing units. And again, most of them were formed from old resorts that disbanded and they sold these units off individually. It's now we're seeing these people that have bought these units are wanting to rent them out. Now, condo bylaws may have some prohibitions, so the condo owners might pit against themselves and say, hey, our bylaws say you can't rent this out because we don't want a short-term rental next to us. But we are seeing definitely a trend that a lot of people are renting out their individual units.
But even at that, when you look at a condo plat, it generally has the building envelope identified, and that belongs to those people.
An LCE, yep.
The limited common element is the rest of it, but they own it. So I don't think you'd have to worry about the 2 on a piece of property unless it was the same owner, which I guess
Happens.
could happen, but
So something to think about for our tabled resort discussion, as well as what we do with condo rentals.
all right. Then let's move forward with area requirements and development density. Well, we have, can we take shoreline out of the equation, or?
Probably can. Because we are prohibiting multifamily dwelling and 2-family dwelling from shoreland. It would be, I guess if there are some weird scenarios where there's commercial that touches shoreland, and it's whether or not someone can do a motel in a commercial zone district in shoreland, or someone can do a resort in commercial and or PUD in shoreland.
By and large, though, it's not, this is not a huge thing.
No, but you may end up then seeing people wanting to request to rezone to commercial in shoreland, just to, I guess, bypass that.
And
If we don't set a stricter density requirement there.
well, I just think if we're going to say in the shoreline wetland ordinance that is a prohibited use, we shouldn't need a density requirement, but that's just me.
I guess, and this, again, maybe something for next meeting, but if we're gonna have these odd scenarios of someone doing, I mean, you're asking us, Jay, to even help with density requirements for commercial properties in the shoreland. Is what those are the scenarios you're putting out about people building motels. So, we'd have to, I'm not as familiar with the commercial setbacks of stuff, but I mean, we'd have to look at what they are now and see if that would be sufficient, for if we're gonna allow something, if something odd like that happens. So that's gonna require a little more research on my part, just to grasp that, but. Anyone else have any thoughts on this committee?
I have just a curious question. How do we deal with, for us specifically, summer camps, if they want to add an additional cabin for camping? Traditionally, it's been kind of looked after through the DSPS, and certainly in our area, we haven't looked that closely other than the structural elements. Is there anything in the county ordinance that deals with camps and population of folks on a site? Just curious.
I mean, campgrounds in general, those would require conditional use permit authorization. They look at a variety of factors. There's an acreage amount. The sites themselves, as permitted number of sites is usually conditioned by zoning committee in reference to a recommendation by the town.
Were you referencing like a boys camp type of thing? The boys camp, okay.
Okay.
So, a structure has to be habitable, and I think it would,
Physical, but not how many people are actually on site at a given time.
Yeah, we would have no reference of that. If someone came in for a request, and we did have one that was going to somewhat be similar to the one you have on Spider there, that would be as a conditional use permit, and you could certainly set that amount on there. I'm not aware that we have any of those kind of, boys and girls types of camps or YMCA camps currently within county outside of the town of Spider Lake, unless anyone else can think of one that I'm
not in this
remembering.
county.
Yeah.
There's a Boy Scout camp down on Long Lake.
I mean, really, it would have the same look and feel, whether it's just for boys camp or kids camp or something, it would have the look and feel as a resort, right? So I would think you'd be able to certainly, by conditional use in a specific zone district. And these are some of the things we need to figure out is, should they be allowed in that zone district? And then to the extent, should there be larger density requirements?
No, it's just a situation of creep over, I think, 80 years worth of expansions that are not well documented. So just trying to figure out how to manage that a little more closely.
Well, would you like to take a crack at non-shoreland where we actually will allow this, and then we can move on from there? So we've kind of broached this in one of the earlier meetings. For density, we basically said, if you want 3 units, you've got to have 3 individual parcels. Is kind of what we said before. You want to change that or stay with it?
What's the size of the parcels?
100 by 200.
100 by 200.
So you would need 300 linearly and still at 200.
Mhm.
Is that for one dwelling or
That would be for 3.
for 3?
In the little scenario I just made up in my head, but
100 by 200?
right now you require 100 by 200 in the R1, RR1 and RR2. And so it would be 3.
So 20,000, is this per dwelling? Not dwelling unit, per dwelling, I think it's 20.
Dwelling.
Per dwelling, so 20,000 square feet is what right now is the minimum requirement for a dwelling, and we're saying if you want to build 3 of them, you should have at least 3 minimum. Site
60,000.
requirement, 60,000.
60,000.
Yeah, to build 3, correct? That's
Yeah,
what, just
that's-
trying to
So it's a
expand
little
what
bit
you're
over
saying.
an acre.
Almost an
be-
acre and a half, 43,560
Yeah, a little under.
acres, so almost an acre and a half. And then I suppose that same thinking would carry forward in the ag and forestry zone districts, which requires 5 acres, so 3 of them would require
15 acres.
15 to have 3.
An acre's 204 feet by 204 feet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's-
42,590, I think.
As part of that kind of initial draft that had gone out to the towns, the language I had in there, which was each dwelling unit must meet double the dimensional requirements for width of a lot or depth of the lot and area of the lot. So theoretically, you could have a 100 by 600, which is the same as 300 by 200.
Yeah, 60,000 square feet.
But it's either double the width or double the depth and double the area for each dwelling unit. Where again, a dwelling unit is 1. And then, well, no, a dwelling unit is 1, a dwelling is 1 or 2. Because that's the combination of that is a duplex, is should a duplex have double?
So again, these are all for per dwelling unit, not dwelling. Per
Correct.
dwelling unit, we're
Dwelling
talking
unit.
about the minimum size, okay? I personally don't have a problem with 60,000 square feet for something with 3 dwelling units in residential. I guess when we start getting into the F1 and A1, it gets a little trickier. You start talking if someone wants to build like a house or a 3 dwelling units on a property that was already going to be 5 acres and they're going to need 15. I mean, I just think that's a lot to ask, but I think they should just rezone it to residential in the first place.
I don't think you need to worry about
Yeah,
A
A and
and F1
F,
because
yeah.
we don't have multifamily dwellings in.
As
or
permitted,
A.
okay, so
Right.
there we go.
In ag, it's all in RR1,
Yeah.
RR2.
Yeah.
Now, the one other thing I will state though is in R1, in the current ordinance, it only needs an additional 5,000 square feet. Where if we want to get rid of that, now would be the time as well. That's in dimensional requirements of section 18. I had that, oh, I'm not sharing.
I would say for sure in RR1 and RR2, I'm happy with an extra 20,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
Meeting either width or depth.
Personally, I don't like that. I mean, I just think it should be twice the area. Because then I guess my concern here is if you have a 300 by 200 foot lot, okay. But then if we start getting 100 by 600 foot lots, we're going to start getting these skinny. I mean, I don't know. I think that adds some of the confusion when you start saying either double the width or double the length, but I'm okay with the area, myself, like the overall area, we're getting to that 60,000 square feet. So I'm happy with that. I can't say that I am on board with the way that's worded, but that's for this committee to decide how they want to do that.
But then you have problems with platted subdivisions.
That's the issue with doing a double or wording it that way. Is that correct? I mean, could that be the issue of wording it this way?
No, I guess for some reason, if you had only 90 feet of frontage, but you had 1,000 feet of depth, I mean, it's not a conforming lot. But you gotta have double, triple the area still.
Well, when you say frontage, I mean, we're talking about non-shoreline stuff here, right?
Frontage of a road.
Right, okay.
Frontage is frontage.
Yeah, yeah.
You could, make reference of a, conforming lot and double the area requirements.
I'm good with the area requirements. Like I said, I'm just a little torn on how that's worded with everything, but
Well, when people have property, I've always been an advocate, you should be able to do what you want with your property as long as it doesn't hurt the environment or your neighbors. And there is, Ojibwa has a ton of those long skinny lots that run
Thousands of feet.
1,320 feet, a 40, and they're only 100 feet wide. And maybe such a thing that well, I've got 5 acres, which is my 100 feet by a quarter mile. And I want a house for me and my kid, and they can put them both up by the road so they don't have to go back into the coulees. I guess I don't have a huge problem with that. But
You still have setbacks, for
Yeah.
your side lot lines, so.
yeah, it's not gonna hurt the environment and it shouldn't hurt the neighbors. Well,
Well, they still have to meet all the codes.
what's that?
They still have to meet the ordinance and the codes with the.
Yeah.
So,
So they would have the square footage. So are we good just doubling or tripling the square footage for, double it
The
for
lot.
2 and triple it for 3?
Can't subdivide it. You have no rules.
Correct. It actually gives them a little boost is what it would do, but
And really, the only way you could ever have two is that it's in one dwelling,
yes.
still one structure. But basically you're talking about the duplex. Should a duplex have double the area that our general zone districts require? Should a duplex need 40,000 square feet of land area? And if you want to do multifamily, which is for 3 or more, you then need the corresponding triple, quadruple, quintuple area.
and again, R1's a little different. You said that right now it's a different.
R1 has 5,000. 5,000 is not a
so-
lot for another dwelling.
I make a motion for the districts of RR1 and RR2 to accept 20,000 square feet, i.e. the Surrey County minimum for each dwelling unit over 1.
For each dwelling unit over 1.
Over
So
one.
a duplex would require double.
Yep, it would require another 20,000. So 20,000 square feet is our minimum for 1. 2 would require 40,000, 3, 60,000, and so forth.
Okay, is there a second to that? Yeah. Seconded by Bob?
Again, this is just for the zone districts RR1 and RR2 because we have a little different situation in R1.
Yes. All right.
So this is gonna change the original motion that we approved last meeting.
I don't think it does. Because that was for shoreland, was that motion?
Stricken, right?
Yeah, and that's still on here. That's this page where it says nothing in shoreland. That's already codified. So now we're on non-shoreland, and then it would be for RR1 and RR2, you want anything over 1 dwelling unit, you have to have double the lot size.
One dwelling unit could be the duplex.
That's 1.
Say again?
A dwelling unit, it would be a single family dwelling. So we're saying if someone's gonna have a dwelling with 2 dwelling units, they're gonna need twice the lot size.
Okay.
Everybody clear?
Ready for the vote.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Mr. Sutton will be,
So we don't want to touch R1, leave R1 at 5,000?
Is there a reason why that is 5,000? Again, are these more, like you said, more residential settings or urban, semi-urban settings that the 5,000 made sense with R1 as opposed to 20,000?
Yeah, I went through the rabbit hole a few months ago and looking at old ordinances back from like the seventies and eighties, and it was in there back then. Why? I couldn't tell you. I have no
So,
clue.
no discernible reason. Okay,
They wanted, maybe for like apartment complexes,
okay.
that, you know, whether it was something closer to the city limits, maybe not in the city, but city limits, that, you know, that would be an avenue potentially allow for these additional units and have lesser area requirements. That would be my only reasoning of why they have that there.
Okay. Does anyone on the committee think that there should be a different set of standards here for R1 than what we just agreed with our R1 or RR2? Should we keep the 5,000 or should we recommend going to 20,000 or something in between? Anyone have any ideas?
Didn't we just okay this by?
On 2 zone districts, with this one, we just got verification now from Jay as to why it was different. And being that there is no discernible reason that there is a difference, I guess we're looking for, do we want to be consistent here with all the residential zone
We did
districts?
rural residential 1 and rural residential 2. We didn't do the residential
one.
one.
Yep.
Because that one says 5,000 square feet for each additional.
Mhm.
And do you want to double that one too, or do you want to leave it as is?
Jay, have
As
there
is
been
is.
any issues with that?
No, I mean, I've had some conversations with individuals that were looking at doing, you know, triplexes, quadplexes in residential. And they were happy to find out they only needed 5,000 square feet to have an additional unit. Yeah, like I said, I think the only reason why it would be in there is really kind of for those apartment complex situations where apartment complexes would ultimately be as a multifamily dwelling, which requires a conditional use permit in R1, which still is going through as a conditional use permit. So if for some reason you didn't think that a 17-unit apartment complex should be on, I'm not going to do the math, but X amount of acres because it's too small of a lot, you could set a condition that it can only be 14 units. So I don't know if you want to change it or not, but now would be the time if you do.
So this is just for residential 1,
Correct.
which is, I think it's a pretty small amount of properties that are actually zoned residential 1. I don't think there's that many, but
Maybe we want to maybe not go 20,000, we go to 10 and just,
10 instead of 5?
yeah, and that way then we know we're getting a little space and it doesn't seem like we're really stepping on anyone's toes, but we're giving a little extra space here and not hopefully going to run into any problem in the future.
I think that's a good idea. Split the difference.
I'll make a motion that we recommend in the R1 district that every additional dwelling unit will require at least 10,000 square feet as opposed to the 5 as it currently is.
Each additional what?
Dwelling unit in R1.
I'll second his motion.
Seconded by Mr. Strandland. Discussion. Laura's lights off. Hearing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, boy, we're moving along now. Do you want to do shoreland even though we have said we don't want it on shoreland?
If we're not gonna have it on shoreline, we should say that. I mean, huh?
We did.
Okay.
Right
Yeah, all right.
here. Prohibited uses. Right now, we're moving on to accessory dwelling units, ADUs. In my truck, I have the cool map for accessory dwelling units, but I forgot it. So when we're talking about accessory dwelling units, again, is it over the top, side by side. What are some of the other ones I'm trying to think of? There's a little chart that shows all the places you can have two side by, two in one. Because, in our thinking, we're automatically going duplex has got the two garage doors and the two houses on the outside, but that's not always what they look like. So, was there anything else on this ADU thing?
I guess we kind of broached part of the issue that before that we have to consider the accessory dwelling unit situation with where we want to allow resorts in the future because they could potentially open up a problem, going forward with, we could, again, like as I look at it, and again, HHS is doing whatever they're doing right now, but if we allow on shoreline lots, resorts as a conditional use in RR1 and RR2, we could potentially have hundreds of new 2-unit resorts. And that's kind of goes back to the 2-unit resort scenario that we may want to delve into next time or whenever we have a chance.
Okay. So we don't have to worry about it for today?
Does anyone else on the committee have any comments or issues with accessory dwelling units they want to talk about? We're all clear what they are. I have a feeling, so.
I think so.
Okay.
All right. We will move on to structures versus uses. And I am the king of conflating a structure like we just talked about, a duplex. How I see it is not necessarily how it is in real life. And so when we talk about the short-term rentals, is that just a structure? Is it the way it's being used or is it the structure itself? Well, it's the way it's being used. So we're talking about structures versus uses. And this was, trying to remember why we added this onto the agenda.
It made sense at the time.
Yeah, it did.
That would be related to the garage, having structure on top, or living quarters on top.
That may have had something to do with it as a ADU.
So.
Well, we also had the discussion about, okay, so you have a duplex, okay, and then the rental aspect, that's where this first came up, I think we were talking, and then that's a use, that's not that, so
That
that's
might
where
have been
that
it.
came up.
Yeah, okay, thank you for, I think the idea was, again, if we're allowing a duplex or a dwelling on on a shoreline lot that can have 2 dwelling units, okay, whether it's a side-by-side or an over-under, we're saying, okay. And then again, the scenario was broached that, well, let's say I built this duplex, I live in one part and I rent out the other. That's perfectly legal from what I understand with the right to rent law. You rent out one, but now if I decide to rent out both units, then that falls under, again, that's uses, not the structure, and that's gonna be, from what I understand, fall under the definition of resort. So again, looking at that in the future too, if we're allowing duplexes, which we're saying, yeah, we can have duplexes on lake lots, but not multifamily, but we can do 2 dwelling units. And we allow as a permitted use or conditional use as resorts in those zone districts, that could be a new fad that starts here too. People start building, 2 units on a lake to rent them out as opposed to 1, because it may not be as nice as 1, but you're renting out both of them. So I think that's just something I foresee a potential issue in the future, and we have to kind of think about that when we're addressing what uses belong where, I guess, in what zone districts. Thank you for that refreshment, Laura.
Well, I think we've kind of nipped that in the bud already, so. All right, we'll move on to 13, nonconformities for lot size, area, setback, structures. Whose was this? This was not mine.
I think this again was part of the density discussion about stuff, but like I said, I'm realizing I'm burning a candle at both ends, or maybe even a third, because this all made sense when we put this together
Yeah.
about a week ago. And now I'm having a little harder time following it today, so.
What is it, Mr. Chairman, that we are trying to,
That's an excellent question. Because,
I don't understand why, what should we do with this?
well, I think maybe we put nonconformities on there because we were worried about making new nonconformities with changing our rules, how many places are going to be affected by the change to the ordinance. If you say, you know, you have to have twice as much of a lot size to have two dwellings on it. Well, how many places are out there right now with two dwellings on it that it will not meet the new standard from the old standard? I don't think it's that many. I think it's relatively few.
But they're okay, they did it, they're fathered in. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, it's existing. It's already
I mean, it's
existing.
there.
Yep.
We wrote this agenda too, potentially as it could be like our last one. So we were trying to encompass all these different things in case they came up, you know, because I mean, like I said, I'll be honest, I admit guilt in this too. I like to almost have an agenda that's probably with a taste of ad hoc, too big to accomplish, in case, you know, as opposed to having it end after an hour. So we added a bunch of stuff here that, again, we thought maybe this might be, when we're getting to these points, that we are done with everything else, that we had accomplished everything else that we had worked on. And that's why we're getting to these agenda items now. So I apologize.
So we can move on to PUD, which has been in the ordinance for 50-ish years. Planned unit development. A planned unit development comes before both the town and the county when somebody's going to do one. I think it would be more palatable, I guess would be the correct thinking. We all worry about, you know, somebody says, oh, I don't want it to be RR2. Hey, make me commercial. Well, you're going to be a standalone island of commercial in the middle of RR2. We can't do that because everybody says that's spot zoning. You hear that term spot zoning so much. Planned unit development, I think, is a little different. I don't think it would be perceived as spot zoning as much to go to a planned unit development because it is what its name implies. They've got a plan. You know, we want Hatchery Creek, not park, but the development there, you know, they came with a plan. You know, we're going to put in this many houses, this many lots. We think it's going to be, we're going to require a town road. I think, Town of Hayward, did you adopt their roads? Yeah. But a lot of them. And so they've got a plan they come up with to make it palatable for everybody. And yes. Yeah. So it'd be something like that where they actually come in. Do we need to change PUD? And we just only have the links here. We don't have hard copies in front of you and we wouldn't be able to do it today, but do you see anything that would make it easier for people to go to a PUD if they wanted to do some kind of multifamily? I always want to give people the option, if they want something like that, if they can rezone to the PUD zone district.
Yeah, and ultimately it would require a rezone. You know, PUDs are a little bit tough because I don't think a lot of town comprehensive plans, you know, identify those as future land use areas. But we can certainly, I can certainly have the hard copies for everyone if we want to look and dive into more of the PUD. You hear it come up once in a while for people that are looking at potentially doing it, but the only one that I'm aware of, and the larger one that I'm aware of, would be focused around the Big Fish Golf Course. That was done by the Bowden Shots, and that is kind of as a mixed use where you have a golf course as well as these smaller individual lots that people own, and some of them are developed on, some are getting developed on for housing.
I have a quick question since you're on the planned unit development. Subdivision and condominium. So there is a subdivision and condominium ordinance, correct?
Mhm.
Do condominiums follow, so they are not required to follow the same requirements as a subdivision? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this via email. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I'm just saying too, is that so, I'm just wondering, so condominiums, any kind of setbacks or anything with those are not in the subdivision and condominium ordinance, but they're found under the more basic setbacks for that zone district then, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just make sure I know where to find them. Thank you.
All right. So since we went the direction we did, I don't think we really have to touch PUDs.
Change the multifamily part of it. That was the only
Right.
thing we did, yep.
Yep.
I think.
All right. Scope of work and identify completed work and work yet to be performed. So I just wanted to have something on there for Ron and I had discussed, when we're done with this, what's going to happen? And basically our recommendations, once we're all on board with it, hopefully after next meeting, are going to go to the zoning committee, who will then act on it, and then to county board for ratification. Is there anything in there that anybody would like? One thing that I would be concerned about is, when you start getting new fingers in the pie, they weren't here for the 10 hours of discussion we've already had in these meetings. I don't want this to get radically changed at zoning committee and then go to county board and have it, oh yeah, this committee made up of townspeople came up with this, when it's not what we discussed. I want to make sure it stays intact. If you know what I mean? I don't know how we can put some kind of fingerprint on it that says, this is what we're giving you. And if all of a sudden the zoning committee says, yeah, that's great, let's take out the part where they say you can only have one dwelling unit and put in 6. Well, no, that's not what we came up with. That's what you came up with at zoning. So I don't know how we can,
Drop out of going, get your.
take our ball and go home.
Maybe, Ron, we could all do a pinky swear that we will not. Okay,
Well, I mean, the general process would be, yes, you would make recommendations, they would go back to zoning committee. Zoning committee can then either make changes or they would end up approving it as such to be sent out to the towns for their review. Sometimes we do get additional comments or suggestions back from the town. Those then are held back at another zoning committee meeting, which is the official public hearing of that, where again, we take in audience consideration. There might be additional changes. I would say, prior to that official public hearing, or maybe even after that official public hearing, I could then re-email whatever changes occurred back to this ad hoc before it goes to county board. And if there's something specific that any of you, as part of this ad hoc, are not in favor of or disagree, then go to county board and say, that's not what we wanted. And then county board can kick it back. That would at least put your fingerprint on it.
And I think some of us will follow it through the zoning committee process too. Just be there at every step of the way, so.
and I think we should.
Yeah, I
mean,
hope you would, please. I
Right.
mean, that's the intention of having, this town representation here. And even when it goes back to the towns for review, and whether you're on those town boards at that time or not, I mean, please be a voice of, we did the work, this is what we want,
Yeah,
kind of mentality.
That's what my plan is for sure, so.
So I think we've accomplished where we want multifamily. If it is going to go in, what the changes would be in density. We've got definitions right from the state, so I don't think anybody can balk at them. What is left to be done then would be, we do have a little cleanup. If we could put it on the, Kathy left, but Oh. Definition number 57 for lot in the ordinance says dwelling unit per, a single dwelling unit. Because it's a single dwelling.
Do you just want to make that motion? I guess it's not
It's not
on here per se, but okay, so we'll add it on there as a discussion item for next
Yep.
time.
Multifamily has modular home instead of manufactured home for next time.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
And we need to clean up the resort stuff for next time too.
And then the resort stuff.
Yep, I got that on.
If you wanna come up with a definition, looks like nobody else in the state has. There's some examples from other counties where they defined resort.
I'll do some homework.
All right. Anybody think of anything else that needs to be on the agenda for next
Modular.
time?
So I'm gonna just make that modular correction because you guys did approve the state definition. And if I put manufactured over the state definition is supposed to be modular, that's just my error, and I will make that necessary change, which doesn't need to be motioned and approved because you motioned and approved already the state one, so.
Okay,
I did find another one, though, we do need to go over, that I want to add on there. So rooming house and motel. Those are permitted uses in a commercial zone district. A rooming house is a 1 or 2 family dwelling. We specifically, again, don't have a definition for 2 family dwelling, yet we prohibit it in the shoreland ordinance. This was motioned and approved at our last meeting that you didn't want to have 2 family dwelling in shoreland, but I don't have a definition of it. So I think we do need to come back and get a definition of 2 family.
okay,
Then from there, if we are permitting C1, rooming house and motel, we should end up having densities on those as well. We did only densities for R1, RR1, RR2. We should have densities for C1 as well.
Commercial, yeah.
all right, and that. Let's get in additional public comment before we adjourn here.
Linda Zilmer, I appreciated a lot of recognition. I heard the thing about something palatable to the towns. And maybe after today's discussion, you as representatives of towns might want to go back and really look at this thing about creating nonconformities. I can envision, and let's just take this 2-family as an example, because it was something that came up in the last round of zoning ordinance amendments that went out to the towns that got defeated. A 2-family dwelling could be one of these lake homes with an upper and lower level. And there's probably a lot of them out there. And I don't think that at the end of the day, something like prohibiting 2-family dwellings like that in the shoreland is going to fly. I also don't think all of a sudden where you've had these 2-family dwellings on 20,000 square foot lots where they're shoreland or non-shoreland, that going forward, you're going to require 40,000 square feet. I don't think that's going to fly. So please give some thought to the things that you guys as a consensus had around the table today, which maybe if you go back and you think about it, you'll come back to the next meeting and have some different ideas. Because I'd hate to see all this work not go forward on something just even as basic as that. So this 1-family, 2-family thing, I think is going to be critical for whether this goes forward or not. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We don't need number 17 because we didn't get it done.
18 is probably for when we're all done with everything too.
Yep.
What about our next and maybe last meeting date?
Mr. Kinsley informs me that the 10th of April would be, if we followed through with,
3 weeks.
We skip future agenda item?
We're on that right now.
We're on there right now?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, I've been flowed with everything else there.
Or future agenda date. We skip over future agenda items until, that was for the end of our last meeting, probably. Again, I don't know the schedule for everyone else. It seems like our next meeting may be a shorter one. But I'm just, okay, I'm okay with 3 weeks. I'm more than happy to do it at a 2-week period if we can. I think we talked about that before, but I'm happy if we keep it on what we got. The 10th is before my duties end in the town of Hayward, so that fits perfectly. So.
good? You like it, Bob? Yep. All right.
Hold on one sec, just checking the calendar. Everything, finance and admins that morning. So yeah, I would still, the 2 o'clock, and I know there's probably some town board meetings that are that afternoon as well, but I would think you'd be available to go to, usually what, they're 5:30, 6:30 most of the time, so you'd be available to go to them still. So April 10th, 2 works for me.
Does everyone concur with that? As a Thursday, yes. Okay.
Okay.
April 10th, 2 p.m.
Hey, I have a question. What about the makeup of the committee? Is it going to stay the way it is?
I don't think there's any reason for any, no matter what the elections hold for any town, I don't see the reason for the makeup to change before our last meeting or for the next meeting.
I mean, until we finish this,
The
what we're out
county
to
board
do.
approved this committee and these members.
Okay,
The county board approved that out. Am I right?
By name, I believe, not by.
Yes.
okay, so it's going to stay the same then.
Yeah.
So it says Dale Olson, whether I get bumped off on April 1st or not, and
Yeah.
Lord willing, I will.
Do we need a motion to that effect, that it stays the same, or is it's not necessary?
It was done at the county board.
Yep, so
Set up.
I think it would take the county board to vote us off. And I don't think they have it on their agenda anytime in the near future, so I think we're all good.
Hey, Mr. Bassett, you got anything else?
We're on a future agenda items.
Sure.
I got 3 quick points just to announce. I think the ordinance needs a fine for contractors, and it should be substantial enough to make them sit up and take notice. That if they build something and know it is against the county board ordinance, zoning ordinance, they should be fined. That's number one. Number two, dead parcels. This came up over I can't foot the golf course out there by the casino.
Oh,
What's it called?
outlots
Outlots.
in a, when they do the survey and they develop an outlot, which is a chunk that nobody can use, like between their road that they did in the golf course, between there and the highway, after they were done, nobody owned it. It's an outlot.
Got it. There's one out there that's like 2 feet wide and 100 feet long. There's 7 different parcels on that properties alone that are these dead, and I don't
And when they don't pay the taxes on it, guess who gets it? Yep.
know what we could do about that, but that should be stopped in the future at least. That's number 2. And number 3, that 300-foot limitation, not limitation, but where you announce to the neighbors what the dummy next door is gonna do on his property. That 300-foot, if I got my measurements right, I've got a spot on my 40 acres that I could build something and nobody'd even know about it because it's over 300 feet from everybody.
But it's 300 feet from your property lines.
From the,
So it's 300 feet from your one corner, 300 feet from the other corner.
That's not where it's located on.
Even,
That we don't know what happened there. I think we might have just lost our meeting and got bumped, but yeah, I mean, it's outside of the scope of this ad hoc, but I think that's more of a public comment you ought to make to zoning committee.
but it's bearing on zoning in this county. Big time. Well, I heard somebody say, and I don't remember who it was, but like there's probably 1,000 of those out there where you got the living space over the top of a garage.
Right.
I think that is utterly amazing to know that contractors in this county, 9 times out of 10, a contractor built them, not the homeowner, but I find it amazing that a contractor would stick his neck out like that and do that. I don't know.
It's a use issue and they write them a check and usually the contractor don't care. It's unfortunate, but I don't know how you stop a use issue like that. Because again, I mean, I've seen just storage above garages and then, yeah, they find, Joe Carpenter down the road and Joe Carpenter walls it off and creates a kitchen, creates a bathroom, creates a bedroom in there. Those use issues we've always struggled with in zoning, always, and probably will indefinitely.
Any other business? Hearing none? We are adjourned.
No.